All right, so we can just get right into the recap part. Um, you may recall last week we talked about some pretty heavy politics stuff. The town was kind of in disarray when the party got back. They like were originally just locked out entirely. The gate was closed. The guard said, "Hey, you can't come in." Council says no one in or out. Um, Party talked their way in, of course. They went and they talked to the council and basically pitched a solution to all the council's troubles by the way the party saw it, and the council was like, okay, yeah, we can go with your plan for now. Gives us some time anyway, and the party kind of like took that victory and went their separate directions. This week was more of a like social catch up week with all of the party's like various NPCs and friends and families and stuff in town, with the exception of right at the start. At the very end of the last session, the party got a message from a runner that said, "Hey, I've got someone with claim to the throne that would like to talk to you guys since you're suddenly big shots." And the party said, "Okay, yeah, we'll go check this guy out. That's fine." With some deliberating and caution as always, they're like, maybe this is a trap and we're all gonna get shot. Uh, so there was about 5 minutes of that before they finally went and they talked to the prince, who was the NPC waiting for them, the notable benefactor. And they walked in. They saw the prince. The prince was sipping on wine, and he said, "Oh, so Godslayers." And that's where we ended it the prior week. And this week we just got right in with the negotiating, I guess. He laid out that like he was not fond of the council's idea of giving control of the entire city to a random like guy on the street who happens to have enough, like who happens to be an heir of the emperor, who, as a brief recap, he's like a human, the first human who used to be immortal and is where all other humans come from. So technically all humans are an heir, and it was just going to be a matter of like who is most an heir, who has the most the strongest blood of Adam at this point. And that was the council's just stopgap plan to like get everyone to chill out, since they were unhappy with their rule and they wanted to find kind of a replacement for the old emperor instead of just letting the council keep going. The prince is like, yeah, no, that's not going to work for me. So how about this? The party proposed whoever shall cut off the head of Salamander and bring it back first, they will be crowned the new emperor. And the prince was like, if you're not feeling that burden of leadership, if you don't think you want to sit on that throne all day every day, if that's not your jam, we can work something out. You can just give that head to me, and like I'll come up with positions of influence for you, my trusty Godslayers, and you know, I can take that burden from you. You don't have to deal with it. My family's got a lot of experience ruling, etc., etc. And the party's like, yeah, but it's been a while, hasn't it? He was like, well, yes. And like, if you were gonna like want power back, your family should have just not given it to Adam in the first place. And he was like, well, my family trusted the person who sealed the gods away and like saved us from imminent doom, and I do not disagree with that decision. However, finding some random child of his, it will not necessarily have the same results. So that's my thoughts on the matter. And they were like, okay, but why wouldn't we just take the throne? And he was like, there was kind of a back and forth like this, where they were like reasonably questioning his motives, and then also being like, well, why don't we just take it? And he's like, if you want to, I literally can't stop you. I'm just giving you an alternative. And they were like, okay, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. I guess we don't have to question that too much. Yeah. So they left that at a we'll get back to you type situation. He was like, yep, take your time. I can't force you to do anything you don't want to do. If this doesn't sound appealing to you, just we can go our separate ways, but you know, you have until you turn in the head to make a choice. So just remember that. So they left, and he kept sipping wine, and they departed for the night. The other leftover piece of business from that session was that Eve got a note from her father, who happens to be the head of the council, or not the head of the council exactly, but a very prominent member, one who kind of helps organize things. He's kind of the council's representative, Councilman Milo. She got a dinner invite from him, saying like, "Hey, you've been out of town for a while. Love to catch up." And she got this like just after throwing the head of a dead god on the ground, and she was expecting the note to be something of slightly more consequence. So she gets this note. It's like, "Hey, come have dinner." She's like, not super impressed, but the party decided to take up that offer. And she said, "So this invite was technically for me, but I'm bringing all of you guys." And there were some murmurs of like, "What? Okay, well, I guess we can go have dinner with your dad." And she was like, "Yes, you will, and let's go have fun." That was scheduled for the night of the next day. The other things that the party wanted to take care of, there was a lot of general shopping going on. There was a lot of kind of checking in with various NPCs, although there was a lot of note writing and like having NPCs get back to them by courier. One interesting thing was that Solus, the elf bard in the party, the oldest character in the party, he's like a couple hundred years old or something. He took the head of that Explicita Dephilus, the head of that god they slayed, took it to like kind of the elder of his family, one of the elders of his family, who he just called. He was like, "Who's the oldest elf I know?" And I'm like, "Well, you mentioned Baba Yaga earlier, like a couple of months ago." And he was like, "Oh yeah, I did." I was like, "That sounds like a good place to bring a godhead if you're gonna, try to get extra information out of it." And he was like, "I like the way you think." So brings Explicita Dephilus' head to Baba Yaga. Says, "Do you know anything about this Explicita Dephilus person? Maybe was like kind of like she was an elf before, maybe didn't have this name, had like pale hair, pale eyes, pale skin, just generally kind of looked like a living ghost." And this vision I had from the before time, surrounded by elves that were of similar structure, stature, appearance. Baba Yaga was like, "Oh, that sounds like these elves from across the sea," which hint they're drow. They're the Pathfinder drow. That like makes slightly more sense, because if you're living in a place where there is no sunlight, you're not gonna get darker. It's just not how that works. So instead, Pathfinder drow are pale-skinned, pale hair, pale eyes, and just generally people that Kuro would find very attractive. So asking questions about that, Baba Yaga says, I've heard of an Explicita Dephilus doesn't ring any bells. This was like a representative of these drow from far away some time ago. If you just leave that head with me, I can ask it some questions." And Solus was like, "Oh, well, very well. Sounds good. I'll do that. Have the head. Let me know when you're done with it." And left it there. And then they went and they had dinner with Evelina's father. And that was an interesting exchange, because I didn't really know who he was going to be yet. I had a little bit of a chance to flesh him out last session, which was like just kind of a stern figure that was trying to like keep the rest of the council under control. The council tends to get a little raucous, and like they have all of their own interests, and he's trying to kind of switchboard, trying to make sure everyone gets heard and makes their points in a reasonable way. He's like he's got the gavel basically. And so this was like another completely different setting for him, and he's just kind of, I felt him out to be this kind of like guarded, patient old half-elf. It's like doesn't react super strongly to anything, kind of tries to get the handle on a situation before like saying anything. He's gonna listen before he speaks. So like the party comes in, they're acting kind of goofy. Like they've been laid out seating positions. Eve gets to pick wherever she wants to sit, but they have like servants have already placed their plates and everything. And then one of them just like sees their plate, slides it on over to Eve, like moves and servants come out and like move the cutlery and the drinks over and everything as everyone shifts around and finds their own places. He's like, "Oh, I forget exactly what he says, but he says something along the lines of like, your friends all have character, is what he says. Um, like keeping a soft chuckle, and there's like general dinner banter back and forth. They tell stories of their little trip down to find and slay exploited dephilists. He's already had a brief conversation with the NPC who hired them. So he's like, oh yeah, Lord Devol spoke well of the adventure and said he owed you a lot. And, you know, Councilman Milo basically said, like, looked at Eve and said, I had no idea you'd become this competent. I didn't know you had interest in adventuring in such things. She's like, oh yes, well, there's a lot you don't know about me these days. Kind of like a edgy response. As yeah, she has kind of distanced herself from her father, trying to do things on her own with her own like means and everything, while still running up tabs in his name in town. I guess that counts as within her own means. And she knows that, well, she thinks she knows that someone on the council murdered the previous emperor, and that she does know that the council kept it quiet on purpose. And so she doesn't really trust her father right now, which is reasonable. And with that, I just tried to portray her father as like, he's pretty proud of what she's done in like the last month, you know, going from in-game terms, like level 1 NPC, not NPC, level 1 character with, as far as he knew, no combat prowess, to like going out and killing a supposed like demigod, like one of these new spirits. And he's proud of that. Maybe a little worried, but mostly proud. And is kind of like not sure why Eve is being so guarded. He's like a little confused. So everyone starts to depart after they've told their stories. Eve, her father says, can you hold on a moment? And they have another little conversation. He basically says, like, I've sent your siblings away to this academy far away from Eden so that they're not in the way of, like, Salamander's forces moving in and all the chaos that's happening here. I was going to request the same of you, but it seems that's not necessary. And she kind of responds dryly and, like, moves on, does not, like, really address this praise, and kind of goes, like, starts grilling him a little bit, being a little coy about, like, his secrets, and, like, says that she's gotten more competent at, like, fighting and also rooting out information and finding out what people are hiding. Saying this very pointedly, and he's like, I don't really get what you're saying. And then she drops a hint that she's talking about the Emperor's death, and he's like, oh, you know about that. Still doesn't really, like, react super strongly, just kind of furrows his brows and, like, accepts that she knows this, doesn't argue with it or anything. And then she suggests that it was, like, someone on the council that killed the Emperor, and he gets a little shaken by that. He, like, starts to kind of, he looks off to the side, and he starts to think, gets a little, like, lost in thought, and then she gives, like, one more biting comment. He waves it off, and says something along the lines of, yes, I'll watch myself. And then she kind of, she leaves. That's the last we see of him for the night. So the party starts leaving after that slightly tense encounter that only one member of the party witnessed. Everyone's talking. And then, speak of the devil, Lord Devol comes, you know, he's sitting outside. He's waiting for them outside the gate of the Milo estate. And he's, like, talking to someone there, just making idle conversation, and then sees the party come out, runs over, says, Eve, a word. There's been a development with the dinner guest you wanted me to invite to see. And Eve is like, oh. And they, like, take a couple steps away. And quite a few sessions ago now, Eve gave this guy a task of, like, I want you to invite this council member that you know now that Wearing Good, you and I are besties, I want you to invite this guy. See what he knows about who killed Adam. And Lord DeVol was like, who killed Adam? Someone killed Adam? I don't understand. Someone killed the Emperor? And he was like, yes, I suspect it was someone on the council. So you're going to invite him over, you're going to ask him what he knows, and then you're going to slit his throat. Yeah, the party did remember that request. Solus in particular was like, oh. And Solus, I think, must have heard about it somewhere, somehow. I don't recall exactly, but he comes over and he's like, maybe we should discuss this not right in front of another council member's house. Maybe we should go somewhere else, somewhere a little more private. And Lord DeVol is like, no, this is like a little too serious for that. He starts like trying to talk in code. Basically like, he says the dinner guest left in good health and sober, and but didn't have what we wanted. Basically, didn't bite. And he was like, "What do you mean?" So he's fine, clearly. Like, what do you explain? He's like, "Well, I," kind of drops the code. He's like, I confronted him and he started to cry. And said, wow, even the public knows about even this, like how foolish we were, and how, of course, rumors would get out, and of course people would know the truth. But he started blubbering something about how he brought up a vote to keep it quiet, to keep the citizens safe, but he wasn't sure if it was the right thing, and I don't think he did it, Eve. I couldn't kill him. I couldn't stab him. Just like handed back. He hesitated a moment and then he hands back the knife. And the party talks for another moment, or another few moments. They start walking again, and then they hear a town crier saying that councilman has died. And then it is this same councilman, the head of the Merchants Guild, apparent suicide, they say, jumped from a building, fell from a building. And the party, of course, all wide-eyed, are like, we should go check that out. And Eve shoots Lord DeVol a look and says, didn't know anything, did he? And then they all charge off to investigate. And yeah, they find there is a crowd gathered around the tower in Clocktown, around the body of the head of the Merchants Guild, whose name I don't have pulled up in my notes for this, of course, because why would I? But one of the council members we just created, he was on the ground being investigated by some green stags, some guards of the city, and there's an investigator like looking his body over. And Eve, everyone else flubs their perception checks that I made. But Eve hears a random NPC say, they're saying it's suicide, but I heard him. As he was falling, he screamed no. I don't think he jumped. I think he was pushed. And another NPC basically saying, no, that's silly. You're imagining things. You're making things up. But Eve kind of takes note of that and is like, things are adding up in the kind of obvious way. And Eve rounds up a couple of people in the party, says, you're coming with me. We're gonna go check this out. Solus walks up, he talks to the investigator, says, hey, I would like to take a look, and basically talks his way through the guards, starts investigating the body, and yeah, there's like no puncture wounds, no wounds of any kind on the body other than the splat wound. So he's like, okay, so he was alive when he was falling anyway. And he was not injured, apparently. So party goes up. They get into the bank. They go up some stairs. They get up to the top of the clock tower. The door has been broken open, and it's very dusty inside. Lots of dust on the ground, and there seems to be. It's hard to tell. It's dark and only lit by the moonlight, but the goblin with dark sight sees pretty clearly that there's set of tracks that goes in, paces around a bunch, goes to the goes a door to a balcony, and then he sees just another set of tracks in the dust, and just walked straight through the room to the balcony, and then there's only like one set of tracks back to the door. And so the party gets that information. There's just a little bit more information of like, oh, it seems like there's some tile damaged here, like maybe someone slid from the roof and didn't leave the regular way. A couple of ancillary pieces of information, but mostly that's where we left it, with the party all grouping up, leaving the clock tower, leaving the bank, and kind of discussing what was happening, and that's where we ended it. So yeah, it was kind of a I didn't exactly know. I had a pretty good idea that was going to happen, but I didn't know it was going to be directly after the dinner party. Just kind of the timing just kind of worked out, felt right. And yeah, so the party was pretty engaged with that investigation. We almost like went extra so they could keep looking around, but they were like, "Nah, we found enough information. We can, like, this is a good place to start off next week, is discussing what just happened." I guess the other thing, yeah, session without combat. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there was quite a few social checks all throughout, but yeah, no combat. Party didn't seem in a hurry to like get out of town. Obviously, they all had their own little checklist of stuff they wanted to do. One thing I forgot to mention is like they still have a curse they have to deal with, some werewolf cursory. They talked to a cleric about that, and that's where they're going next session, like right at the start. So we'll probably talk about making that. All of the kind of the villagers they saved from this werewolf that were already cursed, they sent them back here. The cleric of Denala, kind of the old goddess of life, he's not healed them yet. Says, no, we had to wait for the next full moon. If any of you are cursed as well, then come with us to the church tomorrow, the bigger church outside of town. We're gonna deal with it there then, under the light of the full moon. So that's the way it must be done. So that's part of what we'll be setting up tonight. Yeah, it was a good session. I really liked kind of the intrigue. I liked all the suspicions going around. I liked the way the party was like interacting with NPCs. The party seemed to enjoy it too. It seemed like it was a good time for everyone, except my younger brother playing Sonus, who is like horribly ill. There's a funny scene inside where I mentioned that there were tightly shut doors, and he was like, "That door's going down." And I'm like, "It's not the way you're going." And he was like, "I guess it can live." So yeah, I think that's a good place to take a break, and I'll be right back. Kind of split it here a little bit, and we'll get into the prep section. So thank you guys for hanging out for that. I'll be right back.